Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To follow up on something Dan was saying, we need dispatchable. But when you have Clean Power 2.0 regulations and the cost being passed on the utilities that on existing gas-fired power plants or new gas-fired power plants, the cost is almost prohibitive to the utilities putting that dispatchable online to supplement the wind and solar, as you talk about, Mr. Hauser. And the Democrats continue to thwart the pipeline infrastructure build out that our country needs in order to deliver the natural gas you talk about for the countries like Vietnam to lower their carbon emissions by burning cleaner U.S.-produced natural gas. So, we've got to build out a pipeline infrastructure, produce here at home, deliver those resources not only to our utilities, but also to export facilities so we can export that to countries to help lower their carbon emissions. So don't thwart our efforts on building out a pipeline infrastructure, building more export terminals, and helping the globe while we do the geopolitical things that Dan was talking about at the highest levels, trying to get China and India and Vietnam and other places to take coal offline and use American-produced natural gas. So don't talk out of both sides of our mouth here. We like renewables on this side. It ought to be part of the matrix. It will be a part of the matrix, but we also have to have that dispatchable energy that you talk about. If we don't, we're going to have blackouts in this country. And that brings a point. Earlier today, Congresswoman DeGette said that, or she asked if the rush to green policies are hurting the economy. And you responded, they're not. Well, guess what? Utility rates are increasing. Transportation fuels are higher now than they were in the last administration. Just over the last 3 to 4 years, they've increased for my constituents and all of our constituents. Cost from the trucking companies is being passed on to the consumer through higher consumer goods. That's inflation. And we have subsidies, government spending, when we're borrowing that money, and ultimately that's going to have to be paid back. That's higher spending and higher taxes for my constituents. Maybe not today, but it's going to happen because every time we hear the president open his mouth, he wants more money. He wants more taxes to spend more money. It's crazy. The misnamed Inflation Reduction Act actually did nothing to reduce inflation, actually drove inflation higher because of the things I talked about. Consumers are paying more on the shelf, whether it's for groceries or things they purchase at a retailer. They're paying more because of the transportation costs, because the utility costs have increased under this administration because of this rush to green policy. So I disagree with you. It is hurting the economy because it's hurting my constituents. They're paying more at the pump for gas. They're paying more for natural gas that comes to their home for their dryers and their hot water heaters and other things. They're now going to have to pay more for the appliances because they want to do away with gas-fired power appliances and use electricity. That's going to drive electricity cost up. Then you plug in your EV, you're going to pay more for electricity for your EV. It all trickles down to hurt the economy, and the manufacturers I haven't even talked about that are having to raise prices because it's costing them more just to manufacture the things that they produce, the widgets they produce. In both this subcommittee and the energy subcommittee, which I chair, we've heard from FERC commissioners, grid operators, industry experts that the rush to green policies, subsidizing renewables, and unlawful EPA regulations, as I mentioned earlier, like Clean Power Plan 2.0, are contributing to premature retirements of reliable generation. We talked about that. But we've seen nuclear power taken offline in places like California, even places like Germany. We see higher natural gas prices. This is creating an overwhelming risk of blackouts in this country, and that will hurt the economy. It'll hurt families. It'll put people at risk in cold environments and hot environments, depending on when the blackouts happen. So I want to circle back, Mr. Menendez, and I'm going to ask Mr. Mills this. Do these rush to green policies threaten grid reliability, and does this increase the risk of blackouts?
I think the committee should be aware of NERC, the North American Energy Reliability Corporation, that has done studies on looking at, as we bring more and more renewables onto the grid that are inverter-based, that we have to look carefully at getting too far out over a power that can come on to ramp up and down. So on that question in particular, I think that you should look at the NERC studies.
Yeah, we've had NERC here, and they've mentioned that. We've had FERC here. We have had NRC here, at least in my subcommittee. Mr. Mills, I'll ask you a little different way. Is this hurting the standard of living and quality of life of Americans?
The short answer is yes. In every European country and U.S. state, the increased penetration of wind and solar on grids is associated with higher electric rates, not lower electric rates. The integration challenge and the real costs are higher than is billed. It's the sense it's cheaper. It's not, in fact, operationally cheaper.
Well, I'll tell you this, as we retire generation and we don't replace that generation with dispatchable generation at equal or higher capacity, we're going to run into problems. My state's growing. I don't know about the rest of the country, but South Carolina's growing. And we have got to meet that growth by having dispatchable energy as part of our matrix. 8%, 9% of our power comes from solar, starts at zero every day and ends at zero. And we don't have the storage capacity. We need dispatchable energy or we're going to have problems in this country. And so hopefully this committee and government in general will work on making sure Americans have always on, 24/7, 365 available power for our manufacturing, our municipalities, and our residential growth. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.